Open Market is sponsored by AdLib, the self-serve DSP solution making advertising easy. What do the world's largest demand-side platforms have in common? They're effective, but they require large annual contracts and spend minimums. With AdLib, growing agencies get a single platform that connects to every top global DSP with no contracts, no spend minimums, and G2's #1 ranked support. That means access to the entire universe of TV, digital out-of-home, audio, display, video, and native without a hassle and with no blind spots. It's incredibly easy to use, plus it can automate most of the work your team spends hours a day doing manually. Get the most powerful media buying technology without the barriers to entry. Check out AdLib at getadlib.com today. Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa, and I'm joined by Eric Franchi.
How you doing, Joe?
Great. Eric, you're in new digs this week. You used to be in a beautiful beach house, luminescent, just glowing in the summer light, and now you're in a gray box.
We're at the new HQ of Open Market. Hopefully we'll do some in-person stuff before too long.
Okay, well, he did move to One World Trade Center, so that's not the worst of falls, I suppose.
Nope. I've gone through worse.
A lot of ad tech adjacent companies will put One World Trade Center as their address, but it's just like a virtual thing, like they're not actually there, but it's always nice. I've visited a few clients in the Freedom Tower over the years, and it is a very nice place to be if you're, actually there.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. We love it.
Where do you stand on the work from home thing? Are you do you have an intense perspective on that one way or the other?
Yes. I think in-person is essential. If you're a startup, there are a lot of companies by necessity that, started remote first or remote only, because of the past few years. But if you can have everyone working together at least half or the majority of the time, I think it's a competitive advantage. I think, the information that is shared just from everybody being in the same place, there's just no substitute for it. I don't care about all these tools. And then I do think also that the past few years have proven that not all work needs to happen in the office. So I think, having some sort of balance is fine. But, I love to hear when startups are building together and in the office together. And obviously, as, companies scale and things get different, obviously there's probably more efficiencies that can happen as a result. What about you? Yeah, I'm ambivalent about it. On the one hand, I think all of the arguments people make for working in person are valid. I think especially if you're young, the vast majority of people are going to do a much better job at relationship building if they're in an office working alongside people. So I think that is an advantage. And obviously there's camaraderie and culture building things to consider. On the other hand, in a way, I'm like a poster child for remote work, right? I've always basically been remote. My clients are all over the place. There are a couple in New York, but they're pretty decentralized. And I also love the tools of online relationship building, right? LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. So I think that would be my bottom line is you don't have to be in person to build camaraderie. But then if you want to build relationships with people and do a good job at work and also build your career, you better be taking advantage of online channels to build those relationships and not just be showing up to Zoom calls with your camera off, obviously, and expecting to make those relationships. Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good point. I know we get plenty of listeners who are just, kind of getting started in their careers, being able to interact, build your network, spend time with people across the organization. There's just no substitute for it, particularly when you're early in your career. So, more in person is better, but, I'm not pounding the table that, we only invest in companies that are in person. Like some of my peers at venture funds actually put that line in the sand because I think it's so important.
Right. So today our topic is one that could be controversial. I'm going to lighten it a little bit. Eric put in the outline, PR is dead, which people will get very mad at us about. So I'm going to call it PR is dead, long live PR. My thought being that there are a lot of problems with PR. There are structural challenges that the marketing discipline is facing, but also what we think of PR as doing, which is really reputation and relationship building, is the job of B2B marketing more broadly. And we essentially nowadays still want to do a lot of what was once called PR. It's just the way we do it is different. But yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. And I thought, Eric, we could start by hearing from you as a former operator, current investor in a bunch of companies, that need PR or something similar to thrive on what your experience with PR is and how it's helped you or how you've seen it help other companies.
And it's too late, by the way. You said PR is dead. We're going to clip that up and put it all across the
Yeah,
internet.
exactly. Got him.
Yeah, exactly. Got him. So PR, I think it's super important for company building, reputation building, and ultimate success. Undertone was a long journey and started in a much different era. And I think that we hit our stride. I mean, we're talking, 10 years ago when we did the following. We had, traditionally worked with third party PR firms, had varying success. At some point, we decided to, largely take the reins by ourselves and establish relationships with all of the reporters that covered ad tech and martech, both in terms of industry trades and some of the larger publications. I think we probably got good at the game being like how to work with reporters. So we were often like, a really good resource for them, trying to figure out exactly how this whole ad tech thing works. We would offer exclusives for all of our announcements and stuff like that. And I think, we were probably, for not being, a giant company of the Magnificent Seven or whatever the equivalent was back then. I think we punched well above our weight class, being like very media relations centric in a time where that was, probably the most important thing. We'll get back to, that in a sec. Number two, I think we were early on social in terms of using it and amplifying that stuff. And then, number three, it undoubtedly boosted and built the reputation of Undertone. And, the company that acquired Undertone, which is Perion, the leaders at the time told us that, the visibility and the reputation that we had built was a factor in them making the decision to acquire the company. So I was, absolutely like a fan of and a big believer, and I still am, in being smart about this stuff or, just having a good company.
Yeah, people will sometimes say, especially people who come from outside of marketing, which is obviously most of the people in ad tech, what is this PR thing? Is it real? Is it ever measurable? How do we know it works? What's the value? And like very simply, like the purpose of PR, as is the purpose of marketing in general, is to build your reputation and relationships. It is easier to sell things to people when they know who you are, when they already trust you, when they have affinity for you because there's familiarity, when they know how you differ from your competitors. Those are all of the things you're trying to achieve through PR, and it should generate more pipeline, and it should also help pipeline move more quickly.
But the game done changed.
Right, exactly. What Eric and I are touching on today is that the way you do that now is different from how you did it 10 or so years ago when you and Mike were building Undertone. Like when you say you guys built direct relationships with reporters, do you have any tips for people on how you went about that? Because I think a lot of that is still relevant.
We emailed them. Like, dude, really? I mean, if you would ask any reporter, do you enjoy hearing from sources and executives and founders directly? I think they all resoundingly would say yes. I think they probably have their own preferences in terms of tactics and stuff like that. But if you were to go to like the profiles, whether that's on X or at the publications themselves of like all of the reporters that cover our space or all reporters in general, like their contact info is right there. It's their job to develop relationships with people in the space. So I don't mean to make light of the question, but literally we would email them.
This is like classic situation where Eric is like, I just did this thing and it came entirely naturally to me and it's obvious to everyone. And I'm like, as someone who works with a lot of CEO founders, I guarantee you it's not. A lot of them are, well, what would I email them about? And like, what are they going to be interested in and all that stuff. So I think like a large part of it is like I think you're kind of like me, like you are a discourse guy. You also have a lot of other capabilities, whereas I'm like a lowly marketing hack. But you have a sense of what reporters are interested in, I think, sort of inherently. Whereas I think a lot of other people are like, okay, how do I add value? And so I think it essentially breaks down into two things. Like one is when you have an announcement, right? And then you can go to, Alison Schiff at Ad Exchanger and you could say, we have this product launch coming up. Here's why I think your readers would find it of interest, and this is exclusive to you. Now, I think the mistake that a lot of CEO founders make when they're trying to build these relationships is the only time reporters hear from them is in that first case. Whereas the second case is what I imagine you did plenty of, where you're essentially like, hey, I live and breathe this stuff every day. I see it firsthand. I just have insights on like how digital advertising works and how like what's going on with the hot button issues in the industry. So when Allison posts a story about cookie deprecation, I might see a couple things that maybe the sources in her story didn't happen to comment on. And I'm going to reach out to her and say, hey, I'm not asking you for anything, just like all relationship building. I just thought this angle that you might have missed would be helpful for your readers to hear about.
Yeah, all of that stuff. We're basically we we are the midwit meme, right? Like in the flesh. So I'm the idiot on the side that says I just email them. You're the ninja or the
Yeah,
genius
the
or
ninja.
the
Yeah.
yeah, whatever on the other side. Just email them. And then in the middle, what do I email? Like, do I pitch? In my mind, we've just created the midwit meme. But yes, all of what you just said.
See, this is a perfect, like, you are a lover of the discourse. Like, the fact that you're thinking in the midwit meme, I agree. I love that. But, not all founders are operating on this high frequency.
I just don't post them, but I enjoy them, and I think deeply about the meme.
Okay, so why is PR difficult nowadays? We had two different thoughts about this, both of which I think are right. But let me say what had occurred to me and then you share yours. I mean, I was thinking about like the reason PR is difficult nowadays is that I don't know if you guys have heard, you're in digital advertising, so you probably have. The media's been having a rough go of it for like 20 years now. And there just are vastly more marketers and PR professionals than there are reporters. And when I was a trade editor at Street Fight, which is like a pretty minor advertising and marketing technology publication, I don't know, I would probably get 30 pitches for like every one story I was actually going to write. So you're just up against it on the economics of how stories are produced, especially if you're trying to get something you're doing covered, where you're like, oh, I have this product launch, or I just did a hire and I want, Ad Exchange or Digiday to cover it. They are getting dozens of those pitches for everyone. So I had this anecdote I included in a newsletter a couple weeks ago where like a MarTech company once told me that the metric for the KPI for their PR firm was they wanted 30 placements a month. 30 placements a month. There are like 10 advertising trade publications, and generally they'll only cover you like, I don't know, once a quarter, maybe. They might, if you're good at the thought leadership thing, they might quote you more often than that. But basically, you're going to cover them once or twice a quarter. And that would be, I would say, doing a pretty good job. So that's insane, And I think that's like the fundamental misperception or miscalibration that makes PR dysfunctional is that companies are like, okay, well, I hired an agency. I'm paying them 10 to 15K per month. Their only job is to get me in the media. So surely they should be getting me in the media all the time. But that's just not a realistic viewpoint based on how many media sites are out there. So they end up disappointed.
Yeah, let alone the fact that you're like a SSP or just something that, is
It
a
ain't the
very
sexiest thing.
Yeah, for sure. My take on this was, I think, slightly different, and maybe more macro, which is like fundamentally how people get their information today is vastly different than they did 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, right? Like, when I'm referring to the time period of when we were kind of doing our thing at Undertone and how, we built, our, PR practice and success. I think, most people would in the morning, like go to a trade publication or two or three, or they would get, links sent to them from the people at their company that, were like more into this stuff and everything like that. And I think people just like started their day or went to media channels directly. That has changed and probably permanently with the advent of all of these platforms that are now where people start their day. I'm using to start their day, but like, sort of think of it as how you might start your information consumption, and you are getting your information on platforms and you're getting your information from people that are on these platforms, and you're getting information. Maybe these people are not sharing from media sites to your point. They're just sharing information directly. So I think that just like macro structural change of how like information is now being, generated and consumed is the other side of why those tactics and, emphasizing even those KPIs that you're talking about is completely off the mark for the modern era of how to do this stuff effectively and well.
Yeah, the point of PR is not to get placements. That's one KPI that is particularly relevant to earned media. The point of PR is to build your reputation and relationships. There are
Right.
many channels available to you to do that, and there are many channels where people are consuming information, and there might even be channels where it's easier to reach your customer than earned media. And that's really what we're talking about, is that your audience's news consumption and information consumption habits have changed. So if you're still running a playbook from 2005 where you think the only way, or you're operating as if the only way to reach your audience is earned media, that's obviously an error.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. To your point, the capabilities that exist now are much different and great for companies. There's a philosophy that I don't necessarily fully ascribe to by some folks in like the tech ecosystem, which is just like companies should go direct. By go direct, I mean, not work with media, just get their messages directly to customers via social channels, via email, via their O&O properties. And again, I don't necessarily think that's best for everyone, but it shows that the capabilities are there and the ability to use those channels to communicate directly with the audience and not necessarily have quote unquote gatekeepers is there in a way like you've never had before.
Yeah, I think this is the number one thing that we're talking about. I mean, earned media still has distinct value. There's value in sort of the credibility halo of getting a byline published in Ad Exchanger. There's value in reaching their audience, which may be a little different from yours. Like sometimes LinkedIn and Twitter, for example, can be a bit more ad tech echo chamber-y, not exclusively. Some people say that and I disagree with it, but I do think it's true that you're more likely to reach like so and so at an agency holding company if you're an ad age than if you're posting on your LinkedIn. That said, it ends up kind of evening out at worst and is probably even more on the side of just going direct because it takes so much work and is such a crapshoot to get into ad age. Whereas if you have a practice of building an audience on LinkedIn and Twitter, you can just reach your audience directly. As you said, there are no gatekeepers. No one's telling you what you can and can't say. And you can post as often as you like. I would say like CEO founders in ad tech should and other industries should be posting ideally like 3 to 5 times a week. View that as the primary marketing channel. Like that is the way you're going to build an audience and get your message out there. And I think earned media, while still like very valuable, is more of the minority of the mix nowadays. And so it's not that, PR, the discipline of building your reputation and your relationships at scale is dead. It's just that you need to take a more multifaceted approach to it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And there's two things I'll kind of pile on there. Number one, this idea of, posting 3 to 5 times a week. When you say it, it seems so easy and simple. In reality, that takes work. That takes work to come up with like the ideas, the topics, the POV, like how all that stuff hits, right? So, perhaps some of the work and resources that went into like, the sort of kind of traditional PR, quote unquote, is now just shifting to, different types of strategies, I think is thing one. And then thing two is, again, we're both aligned that there's real value in earned media. And, again, if you're building your reputation through, you just posting as a CEO, as a founder, whatever, that's a great way to get noticed and so to get on the radar of, that smaller but very important universe of reporters and editors that are online all day, just like us, right? So I think it actually creates an advantage for you.
Yeah, social and earned media feed each other.
Yeah.
I was talking to a CEO founder recently, and he posted something on LinkedIn, and got several hundred reactions. It was about a hot button ad tech industry topic. And afterwards, in addition to all of the public comments, a bunch of people were DMing him about the contents of the post to like get his inside angle. Because they know also if a CEO is posting stuff publicly and is willing to be a little provocative, there's probably even more information that they might share, one privately. And so he posts that. And then he's getting reporters DMing him, like, can we talk about this? Can you share more information? And so this is why I'm saying like PR and content marketing should be viewed as increasingly entwined disciplines, because when you do build that audience and you share genuinely interesting insights on social, reporters will be more likely to see you as someone who has genuine value to offer and not just as someone who's in their email inbox via a PR representative begging them to cover your company's announcement.
Exactly. Exactly. I think you just, succinctly laid out like what the modern playbook looks like for, modern PR perhaps, which includes earned media, but encompasses so much more.
I think there are a few ways you can go about that. So let's just dial in really quickly on that. Like when we say, okay, do 3 to 5 posts per week, it's like, what the hell am I going to write about?
That's a
I
lot.
think,
I don't do anywhere near that. I know I should.
yeah, I think one area to go is unique data/insights. So a lot of ad tech companies, for example, have platforms where they're seeing a lot of stuff across advertisers or publishers. Obviously, you can't publish what's happening with a specific client, but you can see trends and you can educate the rest of the industry on those trends. The best example of this over the last couple of years has been analytics. Now they have a particular take on it where they're provocative, and they try to uncover wrongdoing and irregularities. So obviously that's going to get like a special amount of attention. And that is an example of content marketing driving earned media because they've gotten covered by
Yep.
the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and others. However, you don't have to be like crazily provocative with it. I mean, if you can just provide data that helps people understand what's going on in the ecosystem, like a couple companies did this with cookies, right? It's like, how is Privacy Sandbox performing? How is it affecting monetization? If you can take the time to coordinate among your folks who are smart on data and your marketers and figure out what data is interesting, how to package it, and then share that with the ecosystem. That's the kind of thing that will be interesting to reporters and also very interesting to people if you want to post about it on social.
Can I ask a super tactical question?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the example is that CEO that you mentioned before that, posted something and it got a lot of interaction, or maybe it's in general. How do you mobilize an entire company to get behind, these, perhaps not everything, but like key pieces of content? Because we know the network effect of, people engaging and other people engaging starts to make that content travel like, way farther than if it was just, the CEO and a couple of other folks from the company. Did that question make sense?
For sure. This is a cultural thing in the marketing and sales organization. And I think it starts from the top, both with the CEO or other folks in the C-suite being an example of doing it themselves, but also with them sending a message to the rest of the organization. Not only are you not going to like get fired for posting like insights about the industry, which is I think a fear that a lot of people have. They're like, if I'm not perfectly, in line with the brand, will I get, my head chopped off? Not only will you not get fired, but if you're in marketing and sales these days, this is expected of you, right? Like we expect you to be building an audience and we will reward the people who are actively building not only their own, but the company's reputation and relationships through these vehicles. Like the idea to me that, your function as a salesperson would be like, you're going to events, once a month maybe or something, and then you're going to some happy hours and then like you're emailing people. I mean, yeah, of course you're going to do all that stuff, but like this isn't just a marketing thing. It's like anyone who is responsible for generating and closing pipeline should be taking advantage of these communications channels to build an audience and attract more prospects and close deals. So I think it is a cultural thing that comes from the top. But I don't know. You've been at the top of large organizations. So how do you view that?
I think it's a cultural thing. If, you set the expectation that this is what we do here, if you, like embrace this type of stuff rather than having like, a bunch of corporate policies of like, don't do this, don't do this. And even further, you interact as a leader with, like other people's posts, whether that's within your organization elsewhere, like, people just get to know like, hey, this is what we do here. And then I would just go a step further and say when you got a banger, just explicitly send it throughout the organization, whether it's through Slack channels, whether it's through email, and just tell people, hey, please like and share this post. It's great for the company. It's getting some heat. I think it's going to help everybody in market, people just do it. They understand. And this is what I tell our founders, our portfolio companies, which is like, hey, if you have a piece of news that is, like important and a milestone or something you just want out there, email every single investor, advisor, whoever you have in your camp with a specific ask to either share, like, or do your own thing to help put this information out. And anybody that's aligned with the company, unless they're either like lazy or they just don't want to use social media, and I understand it, they're going to do this stuff. So I think
Yeah.
like, just the additional step of just like asking people to do the thing, they're going to do the thing.
Yeah, the way I often think about it is if I were in charge of a 20-person marketing organization, I would want everyone to tell me, how are you actively building our reputation and relationships every day? Like, what do you,
Mm-hmm.
every day you log into work, like, what are you doing to make that happen? And to me, like nowadays, it's just like I understand that people have very diverse responsibilities, and some people would be mad about this because people have like different skills and yada yada. But it's like everyone needs to pitch in that effort to build our audience and build our reputation. And the main way to do that directly, the way you can have the biggest impact on a day in, day out basis is by being present in the online conversation. So obviously, I think that because that's part of my shtick, but I think that that's something everyone should do. So I mentioned unique data slash insights as something that could drive those 3 to 5 posts. Another thing is education. Paul Gubbins, formerly of Publica, he posts these great educational videos on CTV, not provocative, not controversial, just a practitioner who's helping other people understand what's going on in that space. So that's great. And I know he's had a lot of success reaching, brands and agencies through those means. Another that CEOs and founders often have is provocative and is sort of like history of the industry type stuff. Chris Vanderhook of Viant was talking about like how the Trade Desk was able to challenge DV360, and then Bill Wise from MediaOcean commented and was like, here's a history of how Google like jumped over 5 other DSPs and is making in his telling YouTube inventory exclusively available through DV360. So that's really good stuff. Like if you are one of those like 30 people in the industry who has that kind of I've been here for 10 to 20 years or longer, and I know the inner workings and can sort of give a history of ad tech in real time and help people understand the current landscape through that. That's a third type of content you can do. And everyone can approach this by just sitting down and being like, what are the 5 things? What are 5 topics in the industry that I have something of value to contribute to? And then any week, if you're like, I don't know what to do, you look back at those 5 house topics and POVs and you remember these 3 different things: education, unique data, and provocation slash like industry landscape commentary, and you should be able to come up with some stuff to write. And if not, that's what marketers are for.
I would say there's the opposite end of the spectrum of, the 30 people that were there since day one. It's the 30 or the 50 or the 100 people that are, pioneering the next wave, right? These next channels, whether that's AI or commerce or identity or all of these things that frankly, the 30 people that, were in the beginning are not the experts in, right? Because they're not, the practitioners that are building like these AI applications for advertising, marketing, and so on and so forth. You've got, entirely different knowledge and skill set that you can, put out there and educate the space and build your reputation, the reputation of the company. So Adam Heimlich from Chalice. Adam talks about a lot of stuff. That's one of the, the best things about Adam. He talks about Google, he talks about industry, but, if you pay attention to, what he does when he's like, articulating, the state of the state on AI, it's really interesting. And there's more people that, can and should be doing that.
Yeah, and another way to get new voices into the industry discourse is also to elevate your customers. Like
Yeah.
if you, especially like the way you win brands and agencies is, my collaborator Paul Connecton says is it's putting them on stage, which used to be literally putting them on stage and sometimes still is, but it's also virtually. Like that's why people make fun of, every B2B company needs to have a podcast. Like, yeah, the reason they do it is because it's not about generating, millions of listeners. It's getting people that you are either currently work with and want to elevate in front of the industry, or people you want to work with and think are interesting, and giving them an opportunity to share their insights. Because especially if you're like a DSP or SSP and you have, some programmatic trader at an agency, like that person is not put in the spotlight very often. Like they're bosses, but they don't often get the chance to say, here's what I'm seeing in the industry and here are the opportunities I'm taking advantage of and, build a name for themselves. So if you can offer them the opportunity to do that, you'll strengthen your relationship with them and they will share it and get it in front of their peers. And that's how you will reach more people. And you know what? Like that is the OG way to get Adweek to cover you, is to have referenceable clients, as PR people say, but it works for these direct communications channels too. It works for LinkedIn and Twitter, newsletter, podcast, and then you get to decide who's on it and how often and what you say.
That's a great point. And I would say that, again, having just sort of like lived through multiple epochs, I think it's so much easier today to get customers to like speak and be put on stage, whether it's like a virtual stage or a real one, because it's just more generally accepted, particularly at like Fortune 2000 companies, for people to be out there than it was, like 10, 20 years ago. So I agree. That's like, perhaps arguably like the most killer app of them all. And, again, you're living in an era where it's just frankly easier to do it than it was in the past.
Yeah.
We had it so hard in our day. I had to walk 8 miles in the snow to a reporter meeting, and they never showed up.
Well, it used to be there's a reality to that. It used to be easier to get reporters' attention, I think, than it is now because of that dynamics you're describing. But now you have ways to get your message out without getting someone else's attention or getting a reporter's attention. So that's helpful.
Yeah. Who's doing PR well these days? We've talked about this stuff in the past, maybe in the context of the chief audience officer types. But are any companies that come to mind? And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. That are kind of leading in this modern way.
I mean, I think it's the names we always talk about, right? Like the people who are prolific. Ari is the best at this. Like Eric Suford is the best at this. Like they've made like entire, media/insights businesses on the back of their content.
Did you see that he posted a TikTok today?
Shit. That's crazy. I saw Greg Kennedy, who's a fellow ad tech marketing guy. He just did his first YouTube video. So I don't know. It's a matter of time, Eric.
You have to see the TikTok that Ari did. It is so good.
Wow. All right. The bar has been raised.
Yeah, I think the name that comes to mind, and maybe it's just recency. We're recording this on the day that they dropped another big report. Analytics. I think the nature of what analytics does is so they're a company that's in all the verification brand safety space, and they have had a series of exposés of brands in bad places that they continually feed the media as exclusives. I think the nature of what they do lends itself quite well to that type of PR. But every time an analytics report drops, you hear the sound of it dropping. So I give them a lot of credit. And they're obviously quite controversial, and there's a lot of companies that are now pushing back against what they're doing. But use your term, they're certainly in the discourse.
They are, a month ago, we did an episode on the 4 ways to win with ad tech marketing. And to me, they're the ultimate representative of one of those 4 ways, which is share unique data and insights with the industry. They're rigorous and they're not afraid to generate some controversy with their findings. And yeah, a lot of people are going to dislike them. That comes with that territory. If you're going to make a name for yourself by sharing, data that's bound to generate controversy, then you're going to have some enemies on the other side of that. They are a perfect example of a company that has, made its bones, that would not exist in its current form, and I think would not be nearly as successful without content marketing and PR.
Yeah, agreed. Cool. This is a fun chat. I would love to hear from the listener base on if they disagree, agree, if they have any other thoughts on this stuff. What's the best way for folks to give us those thoughts and feedback, Joe?
Tag us on Twitter. Email us, yell at us in the public square, track me down on the streets of Greenpoint, Brooklyn. I mean, let's have it out. We're here to spar. Isn't that right, Eric?
No, I'm not here to spar. I'm here to
find Eric in his beach house. This man has
I'm
too
here
much
to
tranquility in his life.
I'm here to lead a calm, peaceful existence with everyone and nature. But yeah, throw us a subscribe, smash the like button, leave a review. You know, as we've mentioned before, we've got a lineup of guests that is just like crazy. And we get that because people listen to the podcast and they help it grow. So if you enjoy this stuff, that's all we ask.
Should we tease the guests at all? Like, can I give a hint?
Yeah. Give a hint.
We have App Nexus Mafia members coming in future weeks. Very exciting.
We do. That's a difficult hit because there's so many stars that came out of AppNexus, but I think that's good. We'll leave it at that.
Intentionally mysterious.
Amazing. All right,
All
Joe. This
right.
has
We
been
thank
awesome
you
as
in
usual.
advance, folks. All right. Bye, Eric.
Take care.